Living and breathing La Vida Boa. Welcome to the Boa Life Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen DeMora, alongside host Nick Colhay. We're here to have conversations and do book reviews and talk about everything life.
What's up, everybody? I'm your co-host, Nick Colhay. This is the Boa Life Podcast, episode number 19. Ready to do this, Steve?
Let's go. Let's go again. Let's go again.
And again. And again. We're children at heart.
That was
I know.
we're family.
That's right.
We are family.
That's
and we're back at it again. I'm going to let my co-host introduce you in a little, but just to give the audience a little clarity here, we are in our new studio, but we're going to be uploading some podcasts after this that are going to be back at the old studio we were in because we had a little hiccup. We had a wonderful, absolutely fantastic conversation with our guest. And then unfortunately the audio and video was corrupted. We lost it. And we have to beg you to come back and meet with us again and do this all over again. And it's unfortunate because I remember the conversation being fantastic. Although bittersweet, it is, I think, fortuitous that we are here today and able to then upload this in a timely fashion. And it'll be able to kind of not at the same time exactly, but virtually at the same time as your book coming out, which I have here. I'm sure we'll link something to buy it, to look at it. We'll figure something out that'll be nice so that people can take a look, purchase it, do what they need to do. But so excited to have you here today. And without further ado, I'd like to switch over to my co-host, Nick, to do his lovely introduction.
I think Steve did a great job. What do you guys think?
He's awesome.
Tonight we have Niro Feliciano. She is a psychotherapist, a podcast host, and now new time author. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me again.
Absolutely, again. So just to
happy to be here again.
Let's piggyback off of Steve's, introduction a little bit. We recorded with you a couple months back, and unfortunately, we lost all of the footage, which we are heartbroken over. But we're glad we could do it again.
Yeah, me too, and timely, as you said, Steve. Yeah, this will be a good conversation.
I think so, and it'll be. I think the timing works out splendid, great. After we had the podcast, the original podcast, I was fortunate enough to maybe be a part of the book release. My kids, my family, got to experience what I called the greatest fake party in the history of my life.
Filming the book trailer.
Yes, thank you very much for having us and being able to experience that with you. That was surreal. It was awesome, and it was along the lines of what we're doing here. Just a wonderful new experience that I was able to share with you and my family, and thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for being in it. And you're a majority of my bloopers reel, so I appreciate that too.
I think our audience expects that out of Steve.
Yeah. Well, little by little, I'm showing that side of me.
Yeah.
We did we did something that's going to precede this and the intern, because obviously you're a busy woman and getting you back in was, not challenging. You were awesome with your time, and here we are. But we did a little, I would say a little consensus of what's been going on in our lives. We talked about Nick's run and a charity event that he ran for his daughter. And then I did a little running on the track. So that's
a little.
Very little. It was one lap.
A quarter mile, folks.
Yeah, it was very slow too, but I'm here. I survived. I didn't die. So I'm glad to be here, able to have conversations and have you on. And I mean, who better to speak with than someone I admire, someone that the first time we had you on, I said, trying to live up to you, that you wear so many hats. You're a podcaster, you're a mother, you're a professional. I mean, you do so much so well. And I admire you, and I'm glad to have you on, because you're the type of person we want to speak to, because we're trying to make our lives better. I think we didn't call it the great life. We called it the good life, the BOA life, for a reason.
I like that.
Yeah. And in reading your book, which is fantastic, and thank you so much for all the hard work and effort you put into it. It really echoed some of the same thoughts that I have and why we do this. In the book, you talk about if it just makes, one person, if it just helps one person, then that's great. And that's kind of what we say all the time. If what we're doing helps one person, then it was worth it, all the time and effort. And I can only imagine the effort you put into this. It must have been unbelievable.
It was quite a process. Someone asked me today, the anchors before we went live in New York said, did you just love writing it? And I said, no, none of it. I didn't love writing any of it. I liked it was done. I liked once it was finished that I could read it. But writing is a grueling process. And when you have 4 kids at home, on and off, remote learning, we were in the middle of a pandemic. It was hard. It was hard. So I did feel, and I honestly believe, if this helped one person, then it was worth it because one person matters. But I was praying. I was like, God, please don't tell me you put me through this for one person because it was like a lot of work to do. But I'm glad that you felt that way about it.
Do you have any writing in your background, or was this just something you felt you needed to get out on paper?
No, I've never really been a writer. I've been a speaker for a long time, at least since, so now we're going on 16 years or so, maybe a little longer. So I can write the way I speak, which is how I would write my talks. And it's how I wrote my book. A lot of people who read it said, we can hear you in it. We can hear you talking. So, but writing, no, has not really been in my background. I never wanted to be a writer. But there came a time where people were asking, are you going to do a book? Is a book coming? So that kind of was a clue that I had to get ready for it.
Felt a little of that pressure?
It was more, not really pressure, but I thought, people want to hear more. So, all right, maybe there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, it's a unique perspective because you're a practitioner and then you're someone that's in the middle of it. You're able. I love the way the book was set up because it was like, it gave you information, it was relatable, and then it, you gave it tidbits on how to do things, and it's always nice to hear people, practicing what they preach, or preaching what they practice. It is so relatable to me, and it was interesting. For the first time, I read a book that I knew the person, and the same thing. I can hear you speaking to me while I was reading it.
I love that.
Yeah, it was really, really a really cool thing to experience. I mean, it's nice that I know an author now. I know a famous author.
And I'm not famous, but an author.
You're famous in my book, believe me.
Well, it's interesting you say practice what you preach, because I feel like anytime you're starting these new practices, you're going to be inconsistent, right? It takes a while to wire it into your daily routine. So there's some practices in that book. I'm super consistent. Gratitude practices, journaling, connection. The part that I'm not consistent is present focused. And I write about living with priority and intention. And that is hard for me when you have so many other people in your life. You're trying to balance their schedules. So one thing to know is that there are going to be some things that you're more consistent than others, and that's okay. But you can go back and start over many, many times in your life, right? So if we start spending too much time on screens, it's taking away time for our family. You can reset. But it takes a while before these things become consistent. As long as we know, though, what's going on, where's our time going that is into something that's not as valuable, and we can catch ourselves, then we can come back from it. But I think part of what I write about in the book is we're just caught in this culture of busyness that we don't even realize what we're missing. And we feel it, but we don't know how to get out of it.
So in your practice with patients and stuff, being a therapist, how do you get that out of them? How do you show people, number one, like we all know creating habits are good, but how do you relate to them on switching that focus from like they're losing their energy a little bit and they're losing their way and you have to bring them back in? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, well, number one, they usually come in because there's a problem. Right. So we're there looking for a solution to the problem. And for me, because 90-something% of what I have treated is anxiety, it's usually a dysregulation of your sympathetic nervous system. So what many of us have gone through with COVID, just being in this kind of emergent state for so long, is we're dysregulated. There's a lot of stress hormone that's constantly in our body. So part of that solution is creating these habits to combat that, to regulate our system again. And all these practices will do that I talk about in the book. It will calm our sympathetic nervous system, give us more clarity, help us to feel like we're living a more intentional, meaningful life. And because it becomes part of that solution, there's more motivation to do it. And I'm saying that because I deal with mainly anxiety. When you're treating depression, motivation is a whole other issue that you have to tackle. But with anxiety, not as much the obstacle.
So the main difference when you talk about anxiety compared to depression, like how do you define that in simple terms for people to understand, to realize whether they have one or the other or both?
So you can have one primary and one secondary, right? So let's just take anxiety. If someone has anxiety, basically you have a fear, anxious feelings for a period of 6 months or more consistently, and then you can be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. That may prevent you from doing certain things in your life that you enjoy because you either don't want to be around people or you don't feel well, you have panic attacks, and then your life starts to change because you're not living it the way you want to live. Then you can fall into depression. Do you see what I mean? But the anxiety came first.
Always comes first?
No, not always. Sometimes depression comes first. But in that case, anxiety would be primary because you didn't experience the symptoms of depression until after. Mm-hmm. With depression, there's many different symptoms that can go into diagnosing depression. But lack of motivation, change in mood, change in appetite, a pervasive sadness for at least 2 weeks or more. So those symptoms don't necessarily have to do with worry, whereas anxiety is you're kind of worried constantly, worst case scenario thinking. So you can have that when you're depressed, but it's not necessarily a primary symptom in terms of diagnosis.
It's crazy. I think we're just living in an
It is.
filled world at
Yeah.
all times now.
Well, I think too, like I said, we're so busy, we don't have time to decompress, and your body and your mind needs that time to rest. And when we're so busy, we are circulating so much stress hormone in our body, stress hormone, cortisol, and adrenaline. So that it is very similar hormones to feeling anxious. And then many people have this predisposition for anxiety. So it's kind of a perfect storm to happen.
Yeah, I mean, someone that struggles with anxiety and, you worry about some things that you shouldn't even be worried about. It's like you fantasize.
It's a default mode. Yeah.
And you have to, willingly do things like this. This is, I'm a social person, so I love having conversations, but you put it on film and taped with, people that are intellectual and good thinkers, and you get nervous. You want to, present yourself well, and you want to come off and help people and come off well. And, that can present anxiety, but I feel like you got to conquer your fears and do things that make you a little uncomfortable.
I was anxious today. I mean, I've done a ton of segments over the last few years. I was anxious today before I did my segment. I was like, what's going on? Why? Because this was the first one that was really about me and my book. So today, that was something that I experienced differently than I have before. And my husband noticed it. He was watching it at the time. He goes, I could tell that you were anxious. I was like, you could? Why?
Yes.
He goes, because I know you.
Well,
Yeah,
you're outside your element, your box
right.
a little bit. It's like, and you wrote a book, you put yourself out there, and it's like, but you did a great job. So you should be proud of yourself, and it was fantastic.
Thank you.
As I was reading the book, I was wondering, did you start the book thinking, I'm going to write a book about happiness and then go to contentment? Or was that right from the beginning, you knew that this was how the book was going to go?
Yeah, it was always about contentment.
Okay.
Yeah, it was always about contentment because I had done a talk on contentment in 2017. It was 2017 and 18. Mm-hmm. And that was originally the inspiration for the book. I did it on finding contentment at Christmas because it's the time of the year where people are usually the most discontent and stressed and busy. And then that talk did really well. And from that came the idea for the book.
That's amazing. It's obviously my wife was the one that was proactive and got the book because if it was up to me, I'd wait till it was on a shelf somewhere, have you bring it over to me. She wanted to read it. She obviously admires you, listens to your podcast, and
I love her.
Yeah, I like her too. She's pretty good.
Better.
I obviously love her. She's my best friend and my partner. I know you feel the same way about your other better half. Although you're the better half, I'll tell him that. And obviously my co-host, I know he feels the same way as well. But we were talking about something that you had said, you know, what if, and I'll let you say it exactly because I don't want to butcher it, but it was funny that as we were talking about that, how it was such a great way of saying it that we looked at it in a very different way. You know, what if you wanted everything that you had? You said something along those.
That's exactly what I said.
Yeah. And we both had different, you know, thoughts on that, but I said it was just a great way. It was such a profound way of like really being able, and I think you do the same thing that, you know, we as lawyers do, which is, you know, ask questions, you know, I mean, there's no better way to expand and evolve your thinking than to like ask questions, think about the questions, and obviously to journal and write about and write. To me, that was so important to ask that question because it opens you up. It's sometimes we get so preoccupied about being happy and reaching goals and then, you know, moving the goalposts. And it's like, wait a second, you know?
Yep.
And I, especially like the last part of your book that brings faith in, not like you said, not all people are going to agree with that, but I think that faith is a nice post that never moves, but always moves. So
yes.
In our lives, we're always trying to be better people, good people, and you can never achieve that. It's not a destination, you know, it's a journey. It's always living up to a certain standard. You're going to falter, but the happiness and contentment, that's one that, you know, if you don't have these other things keeping you, you know, grounded and with perspective, you can lose sight of all that, and you're never going to be happy because you're always going to think, I want what my next door neighbor has. I want. It was just, I love the way you said. I had never heard someone say it like that before. Was that just something that clicked for you in writing that? Is that something that you always had as part of your practice in helping people? I mean,
you know, you want to help them to appreciate what's already good in their life because there's a lot of things. And if you think about it, and I talk about this with the kids all the time, our life, even with its challenges, is still someone's dream life out there. You know, the challenges that we have, there's someone else who's facing something more difficult or perhaps not resolvable who would love to have that one day. Now, that doesn't mean we minimize what we're going through. It's important that we acknowledge, you know what, this is hard for me and I'm not feeling great about this, or I'm anxious. This makes me anxious. But at the same time, we have to put it in perspective, right?
Right.
So that we can, that partly helps us to move through it, but putting it in perspective. I was talking with a client the other day and she was stressed out about something and we were talking about it. You know, I validated her emotions, whatever, to help support her through it. And whatever she was stressed about had an outcome that was going to be favorable in the end. It was just a matter of getting there, right? So for example, when I was writing the book, yes, it was very stressful, but the outcome was good. I was working towards something good. There are people in stressful situations where the outcome is not going to be good, right? So just to keep that in mind helps to then turn our focus towards gratitude. It helps to relieve some of that stress by adapting that perspective. And then you feel like, okay, all right, I can now focus on this part. Yes, this is stressful, but hey, my kids are healthy today, right? I had a job today. I got out of bed today. I'm well enough to exercise today. Whatever it is that we may take for granted could be something that someone dreams about. So yeah, I think that's why somewhere in the book I say something about how not all the days are good, but there's something good in all the days, right?
Yeah, in plain English, life could be worse.
Yeah.
I tell myself that all the time because you're absolutely right. You know, we're just a tiny speck on this planet with lots of horrible things going on. And to live in one of the greatest countries ever and have the freedom to do whatever we want at any time, literally. I mean, it's I don't want to say it's sad. I feel bad for people that struggle with anxiety and depression and aren't able to realize that life could be so much worse.
Well, you know, if I have a client come in, that's not where I'm going to lead from. Like, suck it up. Life can be worse.
I know. That's more of my, like...
You can say it to yourself.
I know. I like to torture myself a little bit, but it's the honest truth. You're right. If that makes me feel better and I take a positive out of it, I don't, beat myself too up too much about it, but I don't know.
Well, it's the same with me. I mean, what I say to myself when I'm going through challenges is there's a reason this is happening, right? I do believe things that come into my life are intentional and they're for my good. They're for my growth. So I will get to that perspective, but it's not something that I would say to somebody else right away when they're suffering or going through something. We first have to hear them out and support them and validate them. And then when you do that first, that helps to bring some healing and perspective just by them knowing that they have that support and empathy. It's amazing how healing empathy can be. And then they can move on to getting the perspective. But at first, someone just needs to get it out and acknowledge that they're going through something hard and receive some support for that, which is why I also started the book with the first two keys are acceptance and self-compassion, because we can do that for ourselves when we're in challenge to move through that so that we can get to, a higher perspective.
Yeah, no. And then you talk about, being connected with other people and that social thing. And now, the social media is not really, going to work any of that.
Connection.
Yeah. I think very often people lose the forest for the trees, and it's always great to have perspective and put importance on the things that really matter, like our health and our families. And I look at you and I see you have a fantastic partner who my co-host knows well and can attest to that. And you have a lovely family, kids that you are, I'm sure, proud of and should be proud of. I look at them and I see, all right, these are great role models for my kids, because
thank you.
You're very welcome. They're well behaved. They're well mannered.
Most of the time.
Well, having kids, I know. Sometimes I hear people say the same thing about my kids, and I'm like, little do you know.
I mean, I got 2 teenagers now,
so it's a constant struggle. I mean, then you have something happen with your own kids, and you think it's the end of the world, and again, you got to constantly have perspective. And you, as a professional, I'm sure, are giving that to your clients all the time, and that's kind of why we're doing this, to give people perspective. Because, as you touch upon in your book, with social media and these I don't know if it's a word, inauthentic lives, but
disingenuous, inauthentic.
Where you have the picture of the couple and they're super happy and the greatest moment of their lives, but the backstory is it's not so nice of a honeymoon.
It's so funny you say that, because someone just sent me this meme that said a couple's relationship is in shambles when they drop the fall photo shoot, which is so funny. And they have this picture of them like in the leaves on trees. But it's true. It's a lot of people's defense to post things. It's almost like a defense mechanism for what's going on the inside. And that's why I say sometimes, and I say this in the book, sometimes the most perfect feeds are the people who are struggling the most. I've seen that in real time.
Yeah, and then we're looking at this and we're trying to put our relationships up against something that's make believe, that's not genuine, that it's not authentic, which is why these conversations are so important. And why I think that there's obviously a huge need for people like us to write about and to discuss these things, because I think that normal, ordinary people get caught up in a lot of things that they really shouldn't be getting caught up with. And I find myself being guilty of doing the same thing sometimes. How are you staying grounded? I mean, I'm sure the book helped you make sure you are thankful for all you have. Was it enlightening, or did it change your thought process at all, or is it just affirm everything for you?
Yeah, just affirm, especially looking at the research and not only what it does to us neurobiologically to make us more centered and clear and feel more at peace with our life, but also just looking at, this is how I'd like to live. This is how I'd like to live. I don't want to get caught up in something that's not reality. I don't want to waste time in things that at the end of the day are really not going to be that meaningful to me. My life with my kids is flying by. I have 3 years till one goes to college. So that's crazy, because I feel like I was just at your stage and it goes by fast. So writing the book was a reminder that if I want to live this way, I have to be intentional. It's not going to happen on its own. And our culture is not conducive to us living in a way that's intentional and full of contentment. Our culture is designed to make us want more, and we're actually wired to want more. So that's what makes it dangerous. It's almost like they hijack our neurochemistry so that it is profitable to them. So, in order to work against that, in order to have what you really want, you have to be intentional.
Circling back to resistance a little bit, and you referenced Murphy's Law and how if something bad is going to happen, it's definitely going to happen. Or what is the saying?
It's when you really don't need it to happen is when it's going to happen.
Exactly. And you gave some great examples in the book on, what can happen.
Yeah.
How do you stay grounded? Or let's say you're, do you ever have to put yourself in your client's chair and check yourself and kind of have that talk one-on-one with your professional self to your...
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, all the time. Because we know the right method or answer or solution to it a lot of the time. Not all of the time, a lot of the time. But we're humans, so we're reacting as humans. If I can take a breath and separate myself from the emotion a little bit and think, okay, what would I say to a client? And any of us can do that, right? Because oftentimes we have the advice for a friend. What would you say to a friend that we don't say to ourselves in those moments, but we have those words for somebody else? It's the same as with therapists. I might get to some solutions a little bit quicker, but it's almost like you have to put on a different hat in that moment and say, okay, once we can calm the emotion down, then we can begin to think a little bit clearer. But yeah, I had to do that a lot when I was writing the book. Actually, Ed had to do it for me. It's like, it's going to get done. It's okay. We fought a lot during this book because it was stressful. I opened the scene with the book with a fight between the two of us. So that was fun. But
You kept it real.
we kept it real. And in terms of staying grounded, there's that perspective. I mean, gratitude is a really great perspective to adapt when things are difficult. But my faith is a big piece of that. When you have this thought that things that happen to you do happen for your good, and that comes right out of scripture in my faith, then you know that, okay, there's something in this that is going to move me forward in my life. It's not to hold me back. And I do think the resistance, and you'll understand this, in terms of physically training, the resistance is what makes us stronger so that we could do more at the next level, right? And I think emotional, psychological resistance, spiritual resistance is the same.
I tell myself a lot, it's supposed to hurt.
Yeah.
And actually you referenced something that almost, started this podcast, meaning that Steve contacted me after I did this crazy challenge, but before signing up for that challenge and agreeing to do it, I said to myself, there was a moment of clarity, and I said, you know what, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be for the right reasons. And something better is going to come out of this. It's not just going to be me raising money, raising awareness, doing a long run, and motivating people to do the same. Something else is going to be triggered from this event. And that's exactly what happened. So in that moment of resistance where I was questioning myself, should I do it? Should I put it out there? Just that one question was answered, simply as that. Something's going to come out of it.
I believe that. And, I'm also a big believer in the greater the calling, the greater the resistance, or the greater the purpose or outcome, the greater the resistance. Why that happens, I mean, there's so many theories behind that, but you tend to feel that way. So when I feel a lot of resistance at something in my life, I know something's coming because there's this natural resistance that tends to want to work against it.
Yeah, nothing of value comes easy.
No.
You said, gratitude's important. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I'm a person of faith too, although I'm not someone that's going to church regularly. I do have deep faith. I always have. And I try to make sure that every morning I wake up and I thank God, and you certainly don't have to be religious to be thankful for what you have. I think it puts you in that positive mindset so that you can go out there and with that kind of mindset and that positive attitude, I think you can take on a lot of stuff and you can deal with a lot of things that could create anxiety and depression, all those things. And the other side of the coin is what you allude to in the book, which is a problem, I think, that I suffer from, and I think most people do, is that first thing that I'm doing sometimes when I wake up is going to my phone.
It's the phone.
Instead of, reflecting on the day before, reflecting on what I want to do for the
That's
day,
right.
is doing that. And I don't know if I talked about it the other day with Nick. It's, and you touched upon this, is sometimes you get into a rut, and then you have to get back into it. You get into a show, Netflix, you start binge watching something, and then before you know it, you're going to bed late and your routine's all off.
Yeah.
And that's fine. We're human beings. We're going to make those mistakes, even though we know better, like you said. And even, I think that humility and that makes us better when we're teaching or trying to help people, because we ourselves, kind of know the same pitfalls. But things like this book and things like our podcasts, I think, are unbelievable tools, because we need tools, we need keys, right? To keep reinventing and to keep confirming and reiterating and just echoing the same behaviors that we know are successful, that sometimes we get off of our routines for. So I think that's incredibly important. And then from your standpoint as a professional, I think explaining these things and making people understand is half the battle, right? It's like you have a tremendous duty and a job. I mean, I can't imagine the stress sometimes we have here where we're trying to help people, and like the last thing you want to do is harm someone. It's got to take incredible self-confidence and at the same time humility to be able to help some of these people that you're helping them. How do you keep focused and confident, and you have to keep learning? I mean, what are you doing to make sure that you're giving people sound advice and continuing to do that?
So I think, especially now, this is like my 17th year in practice. People don't change much, just historically. We're humans. We have similar needs. We make similar mistakes. So you can recognize patterns in therapy, so you can know where to go with it, right? And although there are different new treatments and new approaches, it's pretty much the same modality that I've worked that's research-based that works for anxiety. Sometimes when you're dealing with relationship issues, you have to be creative. You're dealing with two personalities, or maybe a child and a parent. And there is this thought in my mind. The first thing, you need to make sure that you're connecting with these people, because if they don't connect with you, they're not open to anything that you're saying. And that is a strength of mine. It has been. So I feel very lucky, blessed for that. But then you want to make sure that they're getting something out of it. And the way to do that is you have to know what they want out of therapy and what their needs are and what they're struggling with. And if they feel like they are learning or being able to implement something, they're going to feel like this is worth it for them. That is my priority in therapy, when to hear them, to make sure they feel heard and that they feel connected to me, and not to turn them off therapy, because I see so many clients whose kids or family members or whatever said, oh, they went to a therapist, they didn't like it. Well, it's like a relationship, right? You're not going to marry the first person you date a lot of times, right? I mean, some people do, I guess, right? So
Some
that's
people.
great. That's great if it works out.
Yeah,
But,
good luck.
it has to be the right connection. So, yeah, I don't worry about harming them, because I know everything I'm doing, one, is research-based, but also coming from a good place. But I do, what is the concern is making sure that they feel connected, and trying actively to connect with them, especially in those first couple sessions.
Take us back a little bit. Obviously, the audience already knows we've done this twice, and we could do it 10 more times and still get something out of it. Almost 2 decades now as a therapist.
Yeah.
In the book you referenced, family and stuff, where your parents came from, where your husband, comes from, and all that stuff, your children and whatnot. Take us back a little bit. Where'd you get started as a therapist? How'd you meet your husband? Why is he so cool?
I know everybody thinks he's so cool. He is.
He's very cool.
I have a quick story, and I just remembered this tonight. So I worked for him probably
That's right.
10, 11 years ago now.
No, it was longer, I think.
Yeah,
Longer,
it was a while ago.
Yeah.
And one of the first times he was working in our office, he bought us all breakfast or lunch or something.
really?
I'm like, and at that moment I was like, wow, doctors are really cool. Like, they're normal people. And then we got talking, and for some reason, he had this mini flashlight, like a type of flashlight like I had never seen before.
Sure he did.
Right?
Yep. Uh-huh.
So I'm like, where'd you get that? That's so cool. He's like, I'll get you one. I'm like, what? Next time I work with him, what does he come with? A brand new flashlight.
Really?
It says, here you go. I was like, oh my God, that's the coolest thing ever.
So
he is a cool
nice.
guy.
He is.
I'm glad you brought that up because and I'm sorry because you are the focus here.
No, I love talking about it. He deserves it. Yep.
But I remember, and now I remember some of the fantastic moments of our first podcast together that the world will never see, but we got to experience, thankfully. But I also told a story about your husband, who Nick worked with him because he was a surgeon, and Nick works in the medical field or had worked in the medical field with him. And anyway, the story goes like this. We were talking in the old podcast, and I think we were discussing being in it together and how, you need each other, kind of like connectivity, not so much social, but, people looking out for each other and trying to help each other. And the story goes, my son had gotten hurt. He had fallen. I'm not even 100% sure how he got hurt, but he got hurt, and we were fairly certain that he maybe had broken something. And the time it was during COVID, so my wife and I didn't feel very comfortable going to the ER, and I'm like, what are we? And then I said, I gotta call Ed. This is the perfect person to call. Who I knew this is a field he's in, and who I felt was the type of person that would help us out or maybe shed some light on what we should do. So I said, Kate, I'm going to call, and I was going to call your sister for his number, but I happened to have his number because at the time I think we had been going on some bike rides together. And I call him up and I said, listen, this is what happened. And he said, listen, I'm heading in over to your area because I have to drop. He had to drop the Cadillac off to get fixed, and why don't you just meet me here with the kid? I'll take a look. And I'm like, I just wanted him to give me a number or a contact, like where I could go. And no, he's like, you meet me here. He took a look. I mean, and obviously he's very good at what he does. He could tell right away, and it's broken, but don't worry. And he was right. And thankfully, like at a time where we were incredibly nervous because, I don't need to tell you guys, when your kid suffers, you suffer, and you think the worst, and it wasn't a good situation. And because he went out of his way to do something for us, he didn't need to do it. I was just looking for a number. I didn't think he was going to actually come and meet, and I'm forever grateful. And I appreciated that. And that's just the kind of guy your husband is. It's like,
he is.
Yeah. I'd like to think great. I'm like that too. And if he needed something, I would do the same thing. And I know that's not why he did it, but in life, reciprocating and helping each other, I think that's important. I wanted to make sure I shared that story.
Oh, that's so nice. And he, to this day, will be like, I didn't do anything for them. He doesn't think so, but for me, it was a big deal. And it's funny that sometimes people think that what they're doing is not a big deal, but in the eyes of the people they're doing it for, it is. I'm a professional. I know, something like that is, for him, obviously it's not extraordinary. I thought it was, and I appreciated it. And again, it just goes to show you how good you are that you pick someone as good as he was. Right. Well, I have to say he picked me first.
I bet it goes both ways. And then the other story, which involves you, it wasn't one of the first times we met. I think we met on, with family, maybe the first time I saw you in maybe your element where you're one hell of a speaker.
Oh, speaking.
And your husband may not be that, but he certainly was fantastic. Was an event at a church where you guys were doing some sex education.
That's
I went with my wife.
We did a sex talk for marriage.
Yes, and it was pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie. It was tasteful and funny. Sport. He was fantastic, and you were great. Unbelievable.
Thank you. The next day I woke up, I'm like, what the heck did we just do? Like, why did we do that? Weren't thinking about it in the moment, but hopefully it was helpful.
I thought it was fantastic. I think that these are the things that we need, a practical, information that kind of everybody knows but needs to hear.
Right.
Like you said before, I was like, oh, don't you get nervous? But no, these are, a lot of this stuff is tried and true. People don't have all this information. you have the information because you're a professional, and then you're doing stuff to help people. It's like this podcast that may reach, people's ears and give them information and stuff. Some of it's common sense, but you just need to hear it, because sometimes we get lost. Sometimes we lack the courage or the confidence to go with what we already know to be true. And we just need to hear other people who've experienced it or have resolved issues or are going through that, and relatable stuff, which is what this book is about, and what, life is about, and what our podcast is about. So I think we're doing God's work. We're doing important stuff here. So
absolutely. Well, interesting. You asked how I met Ed, and I met him in the city at an anti-Valentine's Day party. But I know
that is ironic.
And it was called a place called Nice Guy Eddie's. Like, ironically, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
The stars aligned.
They did. And there's much more to that story. But Ed and I grew up very different. He grew up quite poor, and both my parents were doctors.
Right.
And he worked 40 hours a week from the time he was 14 in high school, and then put himself through Yale and then med school. And now coming into our lives as adults, it's far easier for him to be content, or it was, than for me. Because I was used to growing up with a lot of things, and the best of a lot of things. And wanting, I always say, begets more wanting, right? When you're used to a certain level of life, there's always another level. Whereas for him, his comparison was very different. So as he started becoming more successful, he was able to appreciate what he had. And I saw he was far more satisfied with life than I was. I was going towards that comparison side. But then, we got married, and he started residency, and I was in graduate school, and we were poor, for a long time. It helped. You go through that phase where you're trying to reconcile what you want versus what you have. But at a certain point, I was like, we're always going to have expenses. We have 4 kids. Kids are expensive. They have college. They're going to get married, and weddings are a big thing in my culture. I said, we have to learn to be content with what we have and not always looking to the next thing. And when I say learn, it's a learned behavior. It's not something, like I said, that naturally happens, especially in this culture that we live in. But once you can learn it, it's a game changer. It will change your life.
Yeah, I agree with that. Maybe he grounded you in a sense a little bit.
Oh, he will 100% take credit for that. And he's right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's the problem with society nowadays. It's, and it's not necessarily a problem, because there's nothing wrong either with wanting nice things, or
not at all.
Right, aiming to it's when it becomes, counterproductive, when it's, you have a nice thing, but now you want something nicer because, Jane across the street has it, and we get caught up in that sometimes.
Well,
everybody
it
does.
doesn't end, right?
Yeah.
At what point is the end point, right? And
there's always going to be someone with something nicer.
Something more. And, there's a very small percentage of people who can afford all of it, right? Whereas a lot of people sacrifice a lot to have that and at least live this image of having it. And that's coming at a cost. For people who have jobs where, you can work more to make more money, what's the end point? What's the sacrifice?
It's a trade-off. It's less time with your family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those situations, I think, tend to be the most harmful, because you don't have an end point. You can keep going. Whereas there's some jobs where no matter how much you work, some things are going to be unattainable. At least you have an end point. This is what I can do, and that's all. So it is. And even like you said, at what point does the goalpost keep moving, right? Even in just achievements, what we're doing, what our kids are doing, everything seems to be geared from the time they're little to getting into college. But if we don't train ourselves to appreciate that goal once we hit it, we're not going to really feel satisfied by that either. The goalpost is just going to move.
Yeah. It's a scary thing. That's why you have to stay grounded. And I think that we're always making these calculations of what are we trading, what for what, time for, this is time away from my family.
Right.
For me, it's worthwhile. There's buckets that, you're putting your time into, that makes sense, that have ends that I think are worth the time that you're spending to achieve them.
Well, even, in our culture, people are always asking, what's next? What's your end game? What are you going to do? Even with the book, what's coming after the book? I'm like, let the book go out into the world first. Let me just enjoy the book and see what happens. But there's always this question of what's the next piece of your plan? And it's okay not to know. It's okay to say, I just want to enjoy what I have right here. And not only okay, it's far more healthy for us. It's much healthier.
Right. And so they do say some of the best things are free, right? In life are free.
It is true.
And some of our responsibilities and taking on the burdens of being a parent, and, there's time and energy that goes into that is at the expense of a career. I often say to my wife, I could stay and work more and get more clients and make more money, but to what end?
Yeah.
So that we're, instead of driving in a nice car, a nicer car.
Exactly.
Like, I'd rather go see my son's baseball game, than at work. And people are always making these decisions, and every individual person, it's a tough thing. A woman deciding career and how much time she wants to stay, taking care of the home, and a husband, doing the same thing. I mean, these are choices that we make, and hopefully we're making them in a way that we're happy with, that we're content with.
There you go.
Yeah, being content is not easy at all.
No.
I was so glad to see that early on in the book, and because you don't know what to expect when you read a title like that. Where did that title come from?
My marketers at the publishing company. Yeah. So the way titles work is they give you suggestions for titles. I mean, you can suggest your own title, but they do it based on sales and marketing. So that was one of the titles they gave me, and I threw it out to a group of people, and we ranked the titles, and I did not rank that title high at all. So they came back and they were like, this is the one.
Yeah.
And you don't really have a choice in it, but I really appreciate it now.
I love the title.
I'm glad.
Yeah, I love it.
And this is what's been the most surprising. I mean, my target market is not men, but there's so many men who've connected with this book. And I think part of it is the title. It's not a very feminine.
There's no BS. It's
no.
And we touched on that a decent amount in the last podcast, which you'll never hear again. But
Nick, let it go. It's okay.
I'm not content with it yet. I'm not content with it.
You will be.
I will be, yeah, in due time. And we spoke about, us doing this and putting our thoughts and feelings out there to our audience. And then we spoke a little bit about how men deal with, being vulnerable and speaking about the stuff that, is in their inner deepest minds. We went over a lot of stuff. We talked about breathing techniques. We talked about little tricks that can help guys do that.
Now, all of that is in the book too. All those breathing techniques and things like
the
that.
keys.
Yep, in the keys.
So for a guy who may be searching for some answers that hasn't read the book yet, definitely pick it up right away and go read it. But if they're just listening now, how do you deal with male clients in that sense who might have a strong armor on and they're just a softie on the inside?
It's funny. Everybody comes with a different type of armor, and you have to know how to disarm them. And really, to be able to see somebody for who they are, to see through it and validate it and empathize with them without judgment can disarm someone pretty fast. If people, I can think in 17 years, there was one male client that gave me so much resistance. I would say things and he would combat it right away. He would resist it, and he'd go away and he'd come back and he'd be like, you were right. And I was like, I'm not trying to be right. I'm just telling you, I've seen this over and over again. This is how it works. That's why I said humans don't change that much. We fall into the same patterns, so I can identify them. We can identify them, right? So, but he was harder to break the armor down, but it came from a place of insecurity, right? So he didn't want to admit that what he was thinking may not be the reality of the situation. And he didn't want to hear what I had to say. But I have to stay with him in that place and help him uncover what he's feeling, explore it. And then when there's no judgment, it's easier to be vulnerable. I think what prevents us from being vulnerable is that fear of criticism. It's a fear of failure. It's a fear of being perceived as less than we are. So all of those things.
And on the flip side, he's being resistant to you, or in how to frame it necessarily, you're working on your own resistance by him giving you, a harder time than most clients.
Right.
So you're internalizing that at the same time, and you're trying to.
Yeah, it makes you very aware of your ego that comes out sometimes, right? Because most of my clients come to me because they want to hear what I have to say and listen. And then you have one who doesn't. And then all of a sudden you recognize, okay, I have an ego too. I'm pissed that you're not listening to me. So I need to calm that down and figure out what's going on with you.
And he could be probably one of the clients you learn the most from, maybe.
Yeah, it's funny. And I heard a pastor say this once. He's like, as pastors, we have to really like the people that nobody likes in the world. They come to church. And it was so funny. And he goes, but you find the more that you invest in them, the more you spend time with them, you really do grow to love them. And it's kind of like children. There might be people who think that your child has not one redeemable quality, but because they're your child and you've invested in them, there is a natural love that grows out of that place. And I feel like with certain clients, it's similar. Once I hear their story and I can see how they got from point A to where they are right now, it's easier not to have judgment, and you can really care for them unconditionally.
Yeah, I see it at my own job in the healthcare field. Yeah. I don't sit down with them and have a full-on session on a comfy chair, but I do try to help my patients as quickly as I can because I only have a few minutes with each one. And I found some of the most rewarding benefits came from that, just having quick conversations with people. They're, as we spoke to earlier, the healthcare field, I'm dealing with sick and injured people.
Right.
So they are in some of their worst places. And just to give them a few, quality, positive minutes. I've seen people turn into a different person in a matter of minutes. It's unbelievable.
There's a lot of healing that happens in that place. And when people, and I talk about this in the book, when we're not stressed, when we feel calmer, our immune function increases because the same system that works to bring down stress hormone, it's called the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, also regulates immune function. So if our stress hormone is high, that axis gets shut off. So we begin to compromise immune function to lower the stress. So if you're connecting with someone, if all of a sudden that decreases their stress, they will in time get healthier. And that's why all of these practices, we think, oh, it's so nice, gratitude, be thankful. No, people live longer because they're less stressed. And then that energy goes towards increasing and boosting their immunity.
Yeah, people with healthier relationships tend to last longer. That's scientifically proven.
There's stats in the book on that too, right? Yeah. And feel less pain if they're connected in a strong relationship. There's an analgesic effect to connection because emotional and physical pain are processed on similar neural networks. So it's interesting.
So with that, what the difference between mental versus physical pain?
It's very integrated. It's very, very integrated. And I was just reading this book that a surgeon wrote about working with patients with chronic pain. And he was saying sometimes the surgery cannot cure them, even though it's curative, because the anxiety is so high, it keeps them still in pain.
They think they're still broken.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And I do think we were created to be very integrated beings. And there is such an integration between mind, body, and spirit. I talked about an example with the patient in the book too, where literally we figured out something that was going on psychologically, emotionally in this relationship. She made a change, and all of a sudden this intense wrist pain she had, gone.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah. So there are correlations. It's interesting.
Yeah, you talked about the importance of meditation, all these things, all these tools to bring in line spirituality, mental state, physical state. Jimmy Valvano, the NC State coach, was always of the belief that he could help any kid, any student athlete. Like he could take the worst of the worst and bring them into the system and help them out. And it's really mental and belief in oneself and the ability to connect with people and bring out the best. I think these are important things. And I think the other thing too is the understanding that we're all, people with problems, right? We all have problems. And sometimes you said insecurities we're afraid to admit, especially guys sometimes are afraid to admit like there's problems or issues.
We're told you can't be insecure.
Yeah.
You're told you can't be weak. You can't show emotion. You're socialized to equate that with being less than or weak. So it's very mixed messaging for men, right? And now even we're telling you be vulnerable, but then you send a kid out on the sports field. That's the last thing you're telling them to be,
suck it up and be. Yeah. So, I mean, it's confusing stuff, but there's some strength in being vulnerable and understanding that, you have issues and sometimes you need help and these are all important things but there's also something to be said for, being strong and if you got to fight through something that you can do that too. But, that's why all these things are tricky, right? And that's why it's so important to be, on top of things and understand, all the intricacies of all this stuff because, it's not some of it's simple, but some of it's very complicated. It's, it's unfortunately how life is. Sometimes you're looking for, the black and white and there's a lot of gray and then there's sometimes it's just easy and we overcomplicate things.
I think this is the type of book too, when you read it, there will be parts that hit you more strongly than others. And that's what that's an area that you need then, right? Because it's not supposed to be a to-do list, do everything, and then you're going to be content. But what are the areas that resonate with you or that you feel a little bit called out on as you're reading it? Yeah. For me, I am reading my own book now because I don't remember some of the stuff that I wrote. I'm like, gosh, I still have to work on that. Really just my time management and having my schedule reflect the things that are important to me. I still have to work on that. I wrote a book on it. I still have to work on it.
Yeah, I wrote a book on it. I love the process in which you do it too is awesome too because it's like the stories, the relatability, and then the where does it come from, the science, and then the hey, this may help you. I love the way that you set it up. Thank you. I think it's timely and it makes sense and it's like a perfect book for right now and it's in your wheelhouse and. It's just another tool you have, and then for your patients, it's another sigh of relief. All right, I'm with the right person. This person knows what they're talking about.
My patients have been amazing. I mean, they're posting on Instagram. This is my therapist. Like, do you think I'm a well-adjusted person? Wait, don't answer that. She's a good therapist, and they've just been so funny and so open and excited about it. I've always worked with amazing people. I feel very grateful for that.
Half the reason Nick and I are doing this outside of, trying to help people and share our stories, to share the stories of others. And this is just a small part of your story. I mean, the fact that we've had you on before and can't release that one's sad. Like you said, we're going to get over it because I hope that we are able to have you on many times in the future because you just have so much knowledge and experience to share, and obviously you're sharing it through your written word, through your podcast. But I remember when we originally had our podcast with you, you gave some advice that I thought you were spot on with. And it's like, know your audience and who are you trying to speak to, who are you trying to help? And it was like, guys, because we're guys, what better people to help than people that, that we can relate to and they can relate to us. And although we like having interesting people from, all walks of life and we're having you on, I want to always try to keep my audience in mind. And I thought that was like really good advice that, help people that, in helping myself and helping others that are like me. Were you think of any kind of audience with just patients in general when you were writing this book, or was it just what you wanted to say?
You think about your target market, but because I have a husband and I know what affects him, I have kids, I know what affects parents through my own experience. I mean, obviously I relate to women as a woman, but because I've worked with such a range of people And I know these practices are universal. They will help everybody. I don't feel like it was written specifically for certain people. Now, being that it's more women that buy self-help books, that's automatically the target market. But this is not a typical self-help book, I don't think. I think it's very realistic about what that process is like. I'm not going to give you a book that's going to change your life, but it might change moments in your day, which will add up to weeks and months, and then ultimately a healthier, more fulfilling life. So that's not a typical self-help thought process behind it.
Yeah, we're always trying to better ourselves. I
Yeah.
think it's important to make steps every day to improve yourself, and reading and learning in whatever way you can.
And there's certainly men represented in the book. You see Ed's life a bunch, and then I have a few people I talked to, one in particular who lost his son in Sandy Hook. So he talked about what has helped him. And that's why I say these practices work for people who've gone through some serious challenges, men and women.
Yeah, and although there's some topics that are difficult, it's a fun, awesome read.
Oh, good.
Good. You will definitely get your money's worth with this book. I highly recommend it. And
thank you.
I am so happy that you were on again and you did this favor for a second time. And
Anytime.
if you want to throw rocks at our Justin, our video, and you go ahead.
The person responsible.
No,
we are human. We all have these moments. I've told you, I've lost a whole episode before. Literally, as I hit end, the whole thing disappeared. I was like, oh. It makes you very humble. And
yeah, it definitely
also
humbles you up.
Gives you perspective. And what was so great about that therapist, I love her so much, who was doing that interview, she was like, if this is our biggest problem, we're very lucky. And I said, oh my gosh, thank you that it was you, not some of the other people I've interviewed. So,
well, yes, we're very grateful that you had the response to our bad news as the way you did. So thank you for that. Thanks for not being hard on us.
Of course, not at all. I've been there.
And I'm just kidding. I do love Justin. I just wanted to throw some, shade his way. But yeah, thank you so much. I thought it ended up being a great opportunity for us to, jump into the book a little more. Obviously, we didn't want to really talk about the book a lot because we want people to read it.
Sure.
So we don't want to give them the cliff notes. But awesome book.
I love that you're two manly men who liked the book.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people think men who read these kind of books, they don't relate to them, right? Maybe they're more sensitive, whatever. But
there's plenty of men out there. They're not admitting it. So start admitting it, guys. You know who you are. There's plenty of them.
Yeah, no, I think it's important for us to have a breadth of understanding on stuff, and I think you want to sometimes we want to put ourselves in boxes. I don't think it does us any good.
No.
But I look forward to future podcasts. I look forward to maybe being in another video with you.
Absolutely.
I've got
to come.
I got tons of great dancing to share and happy, funny moments.
Yeah, and people can see you on my trailer, which is on my website, NiroFeliciano.com. You can link that, but you did great.
Yeah, we're gonna link everything in the show notes, people. The book, the podcast, which the name of your podcast is
All Things Life. I mean, we're very similar like that.
Yes.
I like that yours is called The Good Life and not The Great Life, because my blog for Psychology Today is called The Good Enough Life. And it's not supposed to mean good enough, meaning mediocre. It's supposed to be almost like two statements. It's good and it's enough. So to be able to see that good is also enough. It doesn't have to be great to be fulfilling and satisfying. So I love that you have good versus great.
Just like you reference, it's like just enough to be satisfied, to be content.
That's right.
So, yeah.
To be honest and practical, because in life, it can't all be great. You can't have the sweet without the bitter. There are obstacles like losing audio and video of a podcast and having to get past that. There's...
Which I don't know if you guys are totally messy. You've only brought it up 10 times.
But if something actually tragic happens in our lives, we'll be in big trouble.
I think for Steve and I, it's our first real...
podcast lost?
Hiccup.
Okay.
So, we're taking it as any rookies would, maybe.
Good that it happened then. Good that, you know what? I read this today. You don't get over failure by succeeding. You get over failure by going through failure, right?
Yeah.
So you get over the fear of failure by failing. So these moments are really important to teach you what you need so that when you get to the next level, you're more resilient for it.
Yeah, the harder lessons are the lessons you learn are the hardest. It's like when I was an athlete, winning, you don't learn a lot from winning. You learn from losing.
Oh, yeah.
For everything you do wrong,
I'm telling that to my 3 soccer players right now. One is a goalie, so
well,
it's hard.
The buck stops there. Being a goalie's tough because
being a goalie mom is tough, Steve.
Yes, being a mom, period, is tough. Being a goalie mom is, you know what? You should start a blog.
Well, I'm sure someone else is talking to one of my other kids about playing goalie. I'm like, stop right there. No, I'm the anxiety therapist. Going to be having panic attacks all the time if you put 2 of my kids in goal. No, thank you.
I mean, that's tough. I always loved goalies I was a forward and I loved scoring, but I always admired the goalies. My favorite player was always a goalie from Portugal. His name was Vitor Bahia. He was a goalie, and I think the amount of responsibility they have, is unbelievable. And it's like just by the fact that that's their position, they have a lot of one mistake and you can lose the game. And so it's
very much a resiliency mindset.
Yeah.
Which, interesting enough, resilience is one of the keys. And people think you're just born with that. And some people's lives lend to more resilience building. But all of these practices result in developing a resiliency mindset, being able to get through challenges.
I like that in the book.
So I put it at the end.
Yeah, you don't have to go through bad things to be resilient.
No.
Meet obstacles like talking on a podcast. You may be nervous to do. It's like just do it.
Right. That's
overcome your fear.
Yep.
I feel like we could do this all day.
We have to find out what your next book is going to be, though.
Oh
so
my God.
we
See,
know.
you're asking
Listen,
me the next.
Well, I know it's in the back of your mind.
There are a few.
The thought has to be there,
Yeah.
even though your official book release isn't until a day from now, and this should be released soon, Justin. That thought is there, I'm sure.
It's
so
there.
Give us a little insight.
Yeah. So when there are a couple things I'm thinking through, and these would be co-authored, but I'm thinking about translating this book to an adolescent version and also a kid's version, just to teach young kids these practices early on. So I am speaking with a child psychologist who we're talking. And I'm trying to get some of my teenagers to maybe have input on the adolescent one. And we'll see. I'm waiting to see how this book does first. But I think especially if kids can learn some of these practices early on, it could be life-changing for them as they grow up into adults.
Not that my opinion should matter, but regardless of how this book does, I think you should do it because I think that there's no greater time for it than now. I mean, kids, I'm sure you know the statistics better than I do, but with between the pandemic and social media and kids are struggling.
They really
emotionally
are. And our culture is only forcing them in a certain direction, which is going to make it worse, if you think about how we grow up versus what they're going through right now. So that's that. But there's a faith-based book I want to write at some point. And that is, there are so many miracles that happened over the course of this book, and they're still happening now. I think there's only going to be more. And I'm documenting all of them because parallel to writing this book has been my own faith journey and seeing how things unfold. So that's a whole other book that will come later, down the line for sure. That one has to be written. I have some pretty crazy stories.
Yeah, I don't think you're a one and done with the authoring.
No?
No, I don't think so.
Definitely not.
I don't think, nor do I think you should be.
Well, thank you.
As fun as as hard as the process must have been, are there parts that were fun? Because I see there's so much more. We talked about this before we went on camera.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for prolonging your stay here. Okay. But there's so much more to the book. I mean, you're doing, you're advertising, you're having to do you're doing videos, you're doing all kinds of stuff. What part of this process has been fun for you?
Oh, filming the trailer.
The trailer.
You know what it was about the trailer? Because you were in it, you shared your dance moves.
Had some celebrities.
I called all these people who were that meant a lot to me in my life. They were my friends. And they knew that they were a part of bringing this into the world. And there was such an excitement and an energy, right?
Yeah.
When we all got together.
It was awesome.
We were filming scenes that whole day. But I really felt there was such good energy and support and positivity around this project. I said, if that's the only good thing that comes from this, that would have been enough. That would have been enough. That day that we spent filming and having all these people who I love be a part of it was enough for me. So that was the most fun.
Yeah, I was,
and that goes to connection. Right?
It was a great connection. It was a unique experience, like I said earlier on, and the video was awesome. Oh, and the outtakes are crazy. It's like the outtakes are fun. Like
they are.
And there's just, you know, when you capture life on film like that, that's just spontaneous, and it's great. It shows like humanity and real life, and I think that's why podcasts are so successful right now. And it's a great venue because it's so real and authentic.
Yeah.
Because I know you talk about in the book, authenticity. It's, you know, people can read between, you know, the BS.
Yes.
You know, they can and they can't, right? Because they're living up to the BS, but I think deep down they know they're, you know, they're it's a head fake. You know, but and again, that's why we like the title of the book so much, right?
Right.
It's not a head fake. It's like, this is going to make you happy, but read it. It'll help.
What's been really fun too is people have been posting, this book did make me happy. You know, so I do love that. I love hearing that. Yeah.
No, I, you know what? And it's funny. It wasn't your first choice, but it still ended up being the title. And I think it's going to work for you. Sometimes, you know, things happen for a reason.
They do. Yep. I have lots of stories about that. You'll hear them someday.
Yes. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming again.
My pleasure. Anytime to do new episodes.
Yes.
Yes.
Please don't forget, subscribe, thumbs up, comment, and we will provide information so that you can get the book, read it, make your life better. It won't make you happy, but it'll help.
Bye, everybody.